If the current visual doesn't give it away, I really like journals. I have quite a few in my lineup, but around this time of year, I always start thinking, what is going to come with me into the new year? What's going to be necessary to have? What's still filling the purpose that I gave to it? And what maybe needs to get left behind? Now, of course, some of these are going to get left behind just for the fact that they are actually full and completely used. Not really considering those ones specifically, but some of them I'm like, yeah, I had really good intentions, but I don't think you're really working out for me. So, in our video today, what we're going to do is go through all of my journals, consider what's working, what's not working. Is this something I'm still going to need moving forward? And thus, am I going to bring it into the new year? Now, yes, I'm doing this process for me, but hopefully you can also use it to do the process for yourself as well. What you might want to grab out is a pen and a piece of paper, because what we're going to be doing as we go through each of these is what I like to call the want analysis. So here we have W for wins, A for aversions, N for needs, and T for to try. Now, I'm going to be just doing this in my scribble book on a piece of paper type deal, but you can also do this with a free resource or printable that we have in our resource library. That one's linked in the description box below. But in order to actually look through these, we're going to get them out of the way and get out a piece of paper. Now, I will say, the piece of paper does already have a little bit of writing on it, but it's okay. It's not very much, and I believe in your ability to set this one up for yourself. We are going to talk through it, so don't even worry about it. But I didn't realize until I kind of started this stream for the second time, because we had to start it again, that I had a lot more notebooks this year than I thought. I was here thinking like, oh yeah, I've used like maybe 7 or 10 or something like that. It's actually 12, edging on to 13, and this is a very precarious stack. So if it falls over partway through, well, we'll deal with that later. But here's the scribble book, right? The scribble book technically is also kind of part of the lineup, so that's not even the 13th one I was talking about. So maybe we've got 14 journals and notebooks. But what I would also include in here is any kind of planners you're using. If they're pre-printed, that would be part of the lineup. Anything that you're using for your own personal organization and just sorting out the stuff in your life to make sure that you stay on track. Yeah, more books were useful because they're smaller than usual. Yeah, that's also definitely a possibility. So in terms of structuring the want analysis, I'll tentatively zoom you in. There we go, like very, very gently. So what we've got are the 4 sections: wins, aversions, needs, and to try. Now, when I do this, I typically like to make the wins and aversions section just a little bit bigger, but I don't necessarily need it to be exactly like a certain amount of space or anything like that. I just do find that typically I have more stuff to write in these sections rather than the needs and to try. I've been kind of equal or even with it here. But if you're doing this for the first time, you're not really too sure how much space you're going to use, what you can do is, instead of writing the titles for needs and to try at the midway point of the page, you can put them at the bottom and then essentially just build your list from the bottom up. So the wins and aversions will kind of build from the top going down, and then needs and to try can build from the bottom. You're just less likely to run out of space that way, which can be quite helpful. Notably, I have not done that. It's all good. So now we're going to go through each of the notebooks individually and think about what are the things that are working, what are the things that aren't, what are the kind of needs that I foresee for next year or things that I predict are going to be necessary for me, and what are the things that I might want to try out or test. We don't necessarily go through these sections in a kind of like super sequential linear order. In general, I usually just reward the brain for having a thought and jot it down into the necessary section as soon as I have it. Mainly because if I start to get too nitpicky with what I allow on the list, I'm effectively like self-censoring or like curating before things go down. That is not the purpose of this. The purpose here is to be very thorough, very, very honest with yourself, because by getting all of those thoughts out onto paper, we can make sense of it and make informed decisions moving forward. That's the general idea here. Now, if we scoot this one to the side, we are going to start with, I'll give you like 3 guesses. What do we think we're starting with? Yeah, it's the same one as last time. So we are starting with the Everyday Journal. This is my journal that, funnily enough, I aim to use every single day. This is the one that I try and get into to write down my daily task lists. I do my weekly structures in there, like my meal plans and my priorities list and all of that kind of a thing. I don't do like major goal planning in here or anything. I have another journal for that, but this is the one that I primarily use to help me tackle my goals, because I pull out the relevant things for each week or each month into this journal so that they're kind of like right in front of my face, front and center. So I make sure that they actually get done. Now, One thing that I have noted already for this is that I love the beautiful cover of it. It's absolutely gorgeous. This is just a great notebook. But I also was thinking that despite loving the B6 size, because I really love how compact it is, maybe this one is a little bit tight on space. So I've noted down that the everyday journal might be a little bit too small for me, but I do still like how compact it is. I like how full the pages get because it's compact. I like how transportable it is. So the B6 is still kind of a winner in terms of a size. That being said, do I still want to keep a B6 for next year, given the fact that that space is feeling a little bit tight? Possibly not. So then maybe one of the things that I want to try for my everyday journal is a size that is a little bit bigger. So every day, maybe I want to try an A5 or a square. Now, you might be thinking, Jess, you've tried those sizes before. What are you talking about? Like this, that doesn't seem very new to you. It's not really like something you're really testing out or trying, like 100% new. But one of the things that I've also really loved about my everyday journal and the kind of structure that I'm using in it is the fact that I've gone to quarterly planning. And quarterly planning has been working really well. So rather than using one notebook for a 6-month period, I've been using one of these for a 3-month period instead. And that ties in really nicely with how I like to do my goals and goal setting and all of that, and just how like my kind of perception of time works, I suppose. So quarterly, I'm going to say EDJ, everyday journal. So if I'm going to keep up with quarterly, if I'm going to lean into that and do more of that because it is a win for me, because it is something I like, then going to a square or an A5 is going to be quite different. Because previously when I've used a square or an A5, I fit anywhere from like 5 to 7 months in those kind of notebooks. So I need to maybe think about how am I utilizing that space? How am I doing the structures and setups in there that I'm using kind of sufficient pages to make it so that I can use one of those notebooks for just a 3-month period without wasting a whole bunch of pages. So these are the kind of things that I'm thinking about as we go through. And yeah, thanks to you, you also do cyclic planning. Oh, I love that. I personally, big fan of cyclic planning. Might be a little biased, but I do very much enjoy it. And that's just really helped with my kind of perception of time and such. As we're going through and thinking about each of the notebooks, what I'm really kind of trying to pay attention to are kind of 3 main categories of things. So one of them is going to be the supplies. So what kind of materials are you using? What do you like about those materials? What's working? What do you not like about those materials? What's not working? It could be about the notebook itself, or it could be about the supplies that you like to use with your notebooks. So for instance, if you're the kind of person who loves a fountain pen, but you're finding that the notebook you've chosen for yourself doesn't work well with the fountain pen, then there's probably something you might want to adjust there, something that you might want to change. And it might not necessarily be scrapping fountain pens in the sake of just using the journal. It might be changing what journal you're using so you can continue to use your fountain pens. It's a very personal choice, obviously, and only one kind of example, but it is something that you might want to consider in like picking the things that you're putting into your lineup. So in terms of supplies, love the beautiful cover, love the basics, might want to have something a little bit bigger. The next kind of consideration I'm making are the kind of practices or routines that I have around using said notebook or said journal. This one in particular is my everyday touch. I use it every day. That's why I call it the everyday journal. And I don't find it too hard to remind myself to get in and use it. Despite calling it the everyday journal, there will be an occasional day that I don't get in and use it. But I'm also not too hard on myself about that. The structures that I'm using in there, the kind of way I've set it up is it kind of like allows for that flexibility, I suppose. Like I don't get too kind of down on myself if I don't get in for a day and just didn't have anything to write down. That's all good. Whereas if I was with a pre-printed planner, then I would have that very obvious gap that says, hey, you didn't check in on Friday, what gives? And that wouldn't work well for me. That would not spark joy or be something that I would really love. So I know that an aversion for me, which isn't necessarily related to this one because it's not a pre-printed planner, but an aversion that I could have is that pre-printed planners would very notably highlight when I don't use a day. For other people, if you're using a pre-printed planner though, maybe you really love the fact that you have that kind of like skeleton structure in there, and the one that you've picked really allows you for the flexibility you want, but within the confines of those kind of like predetermined boxes or whatnot. Maybe that works really well for you, and you can write that down in your wins section. So wins, stuff that's working, we love it, it's helping the journal fulfill its purpose, it's making us actually get in and use the thing. Aversions, don't like that. probably want to adjust it, probably want to change it in some way to make it so that then I'm like more incentivized to use my notebook, or the notebook can better fulfill the purpose I gave it. Alrighty, so this one, looking cute. We've done the analysis for this. I am not going to be opening up the journals, even though part of the things that I also consider, along with like, the materials and the routines, is the structures. So if you have a pre-printed planner, this is where the structure kind of really, really matters, because if you're finding that like it's a horizontal layout, but you prefer a vertical, that's going to be an issue. If it is a vertical and you love a vertical, that's probably a win. Maybe there are some kind of like, trackers or quotes or something in there that you're like, yeah, I guess it's nice to have, but I don't really use it, then that would be something we want to write down on here. As said, honesty is the best part of this. We want to make sure that we're honest. We want to make sure that we're thorough so that we can be very intentional about picking our lineup. Alrighty, so how are you thinking? This one's looking good? Yep, we've considered the supplies, we've considered the practices, we've considered the structure. I'm happy with that. Alrighty, everyday journal is Kaskootin. Now, that being said, I also used other everyday journals this year, and that's in part why my lineup is as big as it is. So this one was an everyday journal, and we also had this cheeky little guy as an everyday journal. Both of these are also from Archer and Olive. I'm pretty sure everything, except for maybe like 2 or 3 notebooks in my lineup, is an Archer and Olive notebook. I might be a little biased. I like Archer and Olive, but both of these ones were also used this year. This one for the 3 months of quarter 3, and this one for the 6 months of quarters 1 and 2. I loved the fullness of both of these. I loved that I actually got in and used them and such. I enjoyed doing different like themes and decoration in here and all of that type of thing. But that's is more like related to the setups of those notebooks rather than whether or not they're going to be in my lineup. For what I'm doing here today, for what we're kind of focusing on, we're not so much thinking about how are we going to set up the notebooks, but more so what notebooks are we going to use. So I don't really have anything that I need to write down about these ones, at least for what we're focusing on. Because the thing is, the want analysis is kind of set up in such a way that it is super flexible. You can really apply it to a lot of different areas of your planning. Today, we're looking at it in terms of planning a lineup and what journals or notebooks we want to have in our little kind of like fleet or set or, individual notebook if you're that way inclined. What are we going to be bringing into the new year? Whereas you can also use this for things like just the setup of your new journal. So once you pick your notebook, what pages are you going to include? What kind of decorative styles are you going to do if you want to do decoration? What kind of things are working or not working in that type of a space? I'll also use this for doing a monthly setup. So if I'm setting up for a new month, I'll go through the previous month thinking about like what worked really well this month, what actually kind of served the purpose, what is the stuff that I want to bring forward versus the stuff that was like, I had good intentions with you, but you didn't really work the way I wanted you to, so maybe I won't do that again, or maybe I'll adjust it so it'll work better in future. So the want analysis, very versatile. We love that. But today we're using it for the lineup planning. Next journal. All right. This one here, if you saw my Instagram story from yesterday, you'll understand why there's a large piece of black tape here. I think it blends quite nicely, though. I think I did a pretty good job of that. Accidentally dropped this guy on the floor yesterday and he split all the way up here. But the reason why I'm slightly less bummed about it than I could be is that this, being my yearly collections journal, has been used since 2022, I believe. 2022, right? So in 2022, I started this one, and it was just to hold those yearly collections or things that I was kind of setting up at the start of each year and using for the entire of a year. But because my everyday journals don't last a full year, they would typically last like, 6 months-ish or maybe slightly less. I didn't want to have to transfer the collections that I had for a full year from journal to journal. I just wanted them to be set up once. It's like a one and done, and then I could come back throughout the year and check in with it. So that was the idea behind this notebook. So just for the sake of like actually understanding how this notebook works, we'll go to roughly the current year, right? So current year, we had essentially life admin gamification stuff. So these were the kind of collections that I was using at the start of this year, and I was planning on using them for the full year. Some of them got used more than others. This is actually pretty full for a future me problems list, so that's not too bad. We had like the 25/25s in 2025. I didn't want to have to set this up with each new journal, especially given the fact that I've used 3 everyday notebooks this year. Setting this up 3 times over, does not spark joy. So I guess one of the wins here is that I only had to set this stuff up once. I only had to set it up once at the start of the year. I enjoy having the year upon year in here as a kind of like snapshot of me. So let's put some wins down. Even though the notebook fell apart, I do very much love the cover, but we are definitely going to have to write down the aversion of the cover falling apart. Wah wah. But alrighty, win for this one. So YCJ, Yearly Collections Journal. I just find that using the little acronyms helps me. Acronym, anagram, acronym. So Yearly Collections Journal, setting up long collections once. Only doing it once was very convenient. It meant that I didn't have to transfer those things. That is something that works for it. It's something that it is a win. But if we're thinking about it in terms of materials, the Yearly Collections Journal broke. It broke. And I mean, okay, I don't think most people are out here dropping their notebooks on purpose unless they're, really trying to give it a good test. But still, that was quite unfortunate. Given the fact that I have been using it since 2022, though, I'm like, okay, yeah, fair. You're kind of old now. You've seen some things, but that was a bit of a bummer. Another thing that I can also kind of note, because remember we have those three main areas. It's the idea of the layout, the supplies, but then also the practices or routines around using it. I have not been getting into this journal this year. My routines or practices around that is definitely in camp aversion. So, Yearly Collections Journal use. I just, most of the time, didn't remember to come back and check in with this one. So there's a lot of collections in here that are very underused, unfinished, and I was kind of wondering, like, would a lot of this information just be better either done on a shorter time frame, so like a quarterly time frame, and thus put into my everyday journal, or could it be something that I track digitally, so moving maybe my analytics tracking to a digital space instead? So maybe something I want to try is doing digital planning, because a digital planner totally can be part of your lineup. Digital planning for analytics and maybe home projects as well, because that is something that I did love having in here, but I need to share it with Vogel, and he's not going to come and check in with my journal. First of all, he won't think to, but secondly, it's like, bro, that's my journal. Get your grubby mitts off of it. Could you just keep anything annual at the beginning of your first everyday journal and then check back in with that even when you move to other everyday journals? That is definitely a possible solution. So as we're going through this and thinking about like what's working, what's not working, me checking in with my yearly collections journal isn't really working. So it's like, well, what possible ways are there forward? One solution is bring that into the everyday journal, maybe putting those yearly collections in the first one. Another solution is putting that stuff digitally. Another solution is changing the time frame. Like, different types of solutions are going to work for different people. I know personally that once one of my everyday journals is done, I very rarely go back and check it with it. So while it is totally a possible solution to put those annual trackers in the first everyday journal, I'm not in the habit of, or typically the type of person who will go back and check in with it. But yeah, this really feels like want analysis week. Oh, it is. It is. Like, I have filmed many a want analysis video because I am want analyzing want analyzing all over the show. But I think for me, I just don't have much love for annual tracking or annual planning anymore. And that one is kind of an aversion. Annual planning. Mainly because my brain can't think that far ahead anyways, and it also feels like I can't like tweak or pivot or change. Like if we go and have a look at, for instance, last year well, first of all, set up this collection, didn't use it. It's fine, doesn't matter. But what I did set up was a bunch of stats pages for myself. So I had like, stats for the YouTube channel and the vlog channel and email list and all of this. I set up 3 spreads of stats, and I was like, cool, that's enough. And then I started a podcast and I needed another page for stats. So we have that one here as well. So because I had kind of locked myself into having this annual space and I thought I had been very thorough, and then something else came up, I had to chuck another one in anyway. Whereas if I had been doing this on more of a kind of quarterly basis, it would have been easier to add those things in a way that doesn't feel like, oh, look, all of this like zero data from the start of the year. But where can we find your podcast? That one is called the Planner Pals Podcast. There is a post over on our channel posts tab fairly recently that had a link to one of the episodes, so you can jump over there to find it if you want. But what about a small notebook instead of a full journal, like a 20 to 30 page thing that you can tuck into an EDC? Yeah, that is definitely another option. Like if I had a kind of, not like this because this is ring bound, but maybe something that's like staple bound or whatnot that I can just kind of put those yearly collections in and transfer from journal to journal, that is also definitely a possible solution. I also found that the collections that I set up in this yearly kind of basis, if we go have a snoop, because why not? Let's go have a snoop. So, and I mean, I know I'm not jumping into a lot of these journals because I have a lot of journals and we'll be here all day, which like might be fun, but also I'm sure the camera will have another beef moment with us. But even though I'm not jumping into these notebooks to really look through the spreads and layouts and such, that is something that you might find helpful, because if you have collections in here that maybe you've forgotten about or something, you can also start considering, is this something that I want to set up next year? Is this something that future me needs? It's not necessarily what I'm looking at today, but it is another thing that you can do as part of your want analysis to get a really kind of thorough picture of what is or isn't working for you. So, something that worked well for me. I love having a goals list. I like having these kind of snapshots of what I was working on each quarter. That's excellent. I started putting these in my everyday journal already though, so that's not a page I need. This one here was mainly for the Life Admin RPG, which I found very valuable in the first quarter of the year, but I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not really keeping up with it, and the things that I was trying to use it to incentivize me to do, I'm already doing, so didn't really need this anymore. So those are two layouts that I now don't need in my yearly collections journal. Next one we have is the side quests, or 52 things to do across the year. I have now changed more so to really leaning into just those quarterly kind of goal plans and the quarterly list of goals that I want to work on. I would forget about this list quite often. I didn't really check back in with it, and thus, do I need to have it? Secondary question, do I need to have it in here? So I'm kind of thinking maybe instead of having this kind of year-long snapshot of, hey, this is stuff you want to work on, do I want maybe a long-term bucket list? And would I put that in here? Probably not. I'd probably be more incentivized to put it into my, not this one, they're both blue. Now she's getting confused. Goals planner. So my goals list could go in there instead. So that's something else that I don't really need to have in the yearly collections journal. So by pulling these collections out, like going through them and saying, okay, are we still going to keep this in this space? You can start to see whether it actually warrants having that space in general. So it's like, this one is gone. This one is gone. Future me problems, I started putting a list of those in my everyday journal as well. So maybe this one is gone. We then get to the 25/25s in 2025. I don't want to do this for 2026, mainly because 26 things 26 times, like, yes, it fits on the page, but come on. Thinking of 26 things to do 26 times, ugh. Keeping up with whether you've done them, ugh. I don't want to give future me homework. This is essentially what I'm trying to be very mindful of. So I guess one of the things that I have identified as a need for myself is more simplicity. Simplicity. And not necessarily simplicity to the extent where I'm going to be going to a one notebook system, because for me, that wouldn't necessarily be simple. I do like having different types of information in different places, because that's something that works really well with my brain. That is definitely a need for me. But do I maybe have too many things in too many places? And maybe by keeping things on an annual basis, that is adding complexity that doesn't need to be there. So the Mastery Builder, don't really need that anymore. The ledger being like the savings and income tracker, I do like having that data tracked, but I don't like having to do the math myself. So I'd rather just do it in a digital system that counts things up for me. It makes it a lot easier. As we said, the homestead upgrades or like the home projects list, that would be better to have in a digital space, because then Vogel can access it as well. So both of these end up coming out of here as well. Don't need to have those. Analytics, we already talked about that. Doing the math myself, it's a no. So that one will probably go into a digital space and also get simplified. And then we have the then and again. So we've gotten like through all of the layouts that I set up this year and kind of talked about how I would possibly put them somewhere else, or I would change it slightly so it kind of works better in a kind of quarterly system rather than annual. If this is the only thing I'm keeping in my yearly collections journal, I think it's time to let the yearly collections journal go. And that's all good. That's not to say that the yearly collections journal was a failure, because that's definitely not the case. Like, sure, there's some pages left over. I could totally fit another year in here, but I've been using this since 2022, and it has served me very well since 2022. This is why I love doing the want analysis, though, and this is why I like going through and being very thorough with thinking about it, because if we're not conscious about these things, we can very much fall into a routine of just doing the same old, same old. Like, oh, I did this year, I'll just do it again. Like, rinse and repeat, copy paste. But the season of life you're in right now might be different to what you were in at this time last year. When you were planning out your lineup for 2025. You might plan it a little bit later. You might not be like me, but still, I think that going through and being very intentional about thinking about these things gives us the opportunity to kind of consciously make the decision to either include or not include something. Whereas otherwise, I would just kind of, force myself to set up another one of these. It would just end up being performative. And then throughout next year, I probably wouldn't check in with it again because I wasn't finding it as useful. It wasn't set up with me and my current needs in mind, which means I wouldn't be intentional about letting it go. It would just kind of fall to the wayside. And I would rather just make the decision up front to say, like, no, this isn't working. That's okay. We can retire this one. And I won't go into spending time, effort, and energy to set something up that isn't actually going to end up getting used. But pour one out for the yearly collections journal. Tiny Tink. All right, hydration is important. Let me know. What are you drinking today? I'm chugging my water because the body's like, please, I'm thirsty. I like this. Yeah, normalize having blank pages in the back. Sometimes it's a good thing to let a journal go when the time is right, even if it's not full. Exactly. Like, sometimes things just don't work out, and that's okay. And I mean, if I had so many pages in here that it was like, oh God, I just feel really bad about letting this go, if I'd only used maybe this much of it or something like that, there are ways we can repurpose a notebook. There are ways that we can use it for something else. And we do actually have one repurposed notebook in this lineup, so we'll definitely have a look at that one. We're going to look at all of them. So we got some tea, we got some water, we got some Dr. Pepper, nice sparkling water today. The body will only let me take in water today. Well, at least the body will be hydrated. So next one, what do we reckon? I'm going to go with this guy, because we very rarely see this guy. You might be like, oh, where's his elastic closure? It's crazy. I accidentally ripped the bookmarks out of this one, so now I use the elastic closure as a bookmark. Whoops. So this one here is my 5-year journal. It is very much a memory keeping style journal, which I don't do a lot of journal based memory keeping, but I have actually kept up with this one. And I'm feeling very good about that. That being said, I think I have gotten a little bit out of habit of checking in with it on a daily basis, which is something that I would like to do. So if we're thinking about, those 3 categories, the supplies, the layouts, and the practices, my practices or routines around this one they're intact, but they're getting a little lax. So 5YJ, so 5-year journal, daily check-in. And then I'm just going to put in brackets, not, because I haven't been checking in with it daily. And because I am not necessarily great at remembering the things that have happened, checking in with this on a more regular basis is a good idea for me. Otherwise, what happens is that I get, 2 or 3 or 4 days later, I'm like, what happened on Monday? Well, I guess we're just going to have to make things up. Thankfully, at least at this stage, I'm doing like a vlogging series, so it's a little easier to remember what's been going on. I can at least go back and check the footage, but I'm not always doing that. So daily checking in, that would be great. The fact that I've been keeping up with, though, that feels good. So 5YJ dash keeping up with it. Keeping up with it. Now, there are some aversions that I have to the layout that I ended up using in here. In particular, the way that I structured it is that we have a half page for each day of the year, and then that's separated into 5 sections, one for each of the 5 years of the 5 journals. 5 journals, the 5-year journal. She can do this. I Don't love that I came in as far on this kind of side panel. I understand why I did it, but I think I would prefer to have a little bit more horizontal space to write stuff in. Not to the extent where I'm going to change this notebook next year or anything, because I still have another 2 years to go in here. But it is something I would like to keep in mind for when or if I set up a new one of these. Now, obviously, we're writing these notes down in a scribble book, right? This scribble book is intended to not be a permanent thing. The scribble book is intended to be messy, just scrappy notes that then, once I'm done with it, I can just kind of recycle it, throw it away, whatever. Which means that when I go to process this information, I want to save this note somewhere I will be able to reflect on it when it comes to the time that I set this up. In 2 years' time, when I'm setting a new one up, or if I'm setting a new one up, maybe it won't be so much of a problem. Maybe I will get to a point where I'm like, no, actually, I really did like this structure. It worked really well. I'm just going to keep with it. But I would like to, first of all, reward the brain for having a thought by writing it down. And secondly, save that information somewhere where I'm going to be more likely to use it. So possibly I could save it in here, maybe write it on a sticky note and stick that in the back of the journal or something, or in the front, somewhere I'm going to be able to see it again. Or possibly you have another long-term space you like to save those kind of notes to future you, something like that, possibly. But we're going to say 5-year journal structure in general. Structure, and then we're going to be more specific because it's better to be more specific than too vague on this. Limited space. Limited writing space is probably even better, because otherwise you'll come back to your list and you'll be like, what about it? Like, cool note, bro. Like, I have no idea what you were talking about. We want to make sure this information is actually usable for us. So I have been enjoying this. I have actually been checking in with it. I'm very pleased and impressed with myself, because that is, all of these ones are full of 3 years worth of little notes about what happened each day. And the fact that we're currently on the 16th for me, but last year on the 15th, off to Sydney for the bookshop hop, met Deb, good flight, got a room swap, rah, rah, rah. Like, being able to look back on those memories, it's kind of fun. So I have very much enjoyed that. I like the simplicity of how I fill in information here. I like the flexibility of it, and I love the fact that I've kept up with it, even though my daily practice with it isn't as strong as it could be. Yeah. This will definitely help with you figuring out what you want to write down in your 2026 Bujo. Excellent. I'm glad to hear. So next journal, because this train keeps moving. This guy is my goals journal. Now, one thing that I do like is that I put the elastic on here so that I can just open up at the current quarter. That has been very sensible. So that is kind of like a structural thing that I would like to take forward with me. So we're going to say GJ, goals journal. Is it a GP, goal planner? Technically, I interchange. I call them either or both. Do you call your notebook or planner a planner or a journal or a diary? Or like, what do you call yours? I most often default to the term journal for most of mine, but this one I do more often call it a planner because it's where I plan my goals. So for the goal planner, I like the elastic to section out spaces. That is helpful. It's a helpful feature that I have included, and I shall continue. Yeah, goal planning journal, the GPJ. Yeah, then at least it has 3 letters. It's got a 3-letter code like everything else, right? There we go. You use a journal. I call it my journal unless I'm referring specifically to my calendar. Makes sense. Use a pre-printed planner. So you call journals generally. Nice. Planners, because journals are financial documents to me. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of interesting how we all have our own terminology that kind of resonates with us. But this has actually, I don't think I have any major aversions to this outside of the fact that because I have been doing my actions list for these by using the Alistair method, which essentially like we have columns for each of the week numbers and then a column for the task, I have been feeling a little pinched on space here. So I would possibly like to move to a square for this one. But that being said, if we have a look at the amount of space I've used in here, we are currently up to this spot here. I still have this much space left in this notebook, so it probably is going to last me at least another year. So I'm probably not looking to change it, but it is something that I possibly want to remind myself of later. I might write it on a sticky note or something like that when we process this information. So the issue for me is that the horizontal width is maybe insufficient for how I'm doing my action plans. You know, when we're going through these, you really want to think about, how am I using this? Not how would I ideally like to use it, or how would I aspirationally like to plan, but what are my actual practices, actual routines, actual habits with this? And are the materials that I'm using and my habits aligned nicely? Because there are plenty of things that we need to do in life where we just have to like fit the mold. I don't think our planner should be one of them. Like, we have so many choices here. You have flexibility and freedom. Make sure that you exercise your flexibility and freedom to make choices that are good for you. So for me, the GP, or the GPJ, whatever we're calling it, horizontal space, not enough of it. Horizontal space limited. So then we could say, like, maybe something to try here is GP in a square. Not necessarily for next year, though also maybe for next year. Maybe. Maybe I'll just be like, you know what? It's cool that we have the last little bit of this left. Maybe I just want to set up a new goals journal, especially because, you know, with this elastic that I have kind of closing off the front part of the notebook, you know, it goes all the way from the front to whatever the current quarter is. That means that I don't access any of the start of journal pages in here, and I don't really reference them. It might be nice to actually have some reference materials that I do reference. So possibly I set up a new one. Maybe. I'm thinking about it. I'm musing with the idea. Plus, I also love setting up new journals. That's also a problem. There's like a hobby in that. Yeah, the GP is my general practitioner. Exactly. That's what I'm kind of thinking when I'm going through. I'm like, should I call it the GP? It's technically like not that kind of GP. But anyways. So next notebook to look at, we're going to look at this one. So this one here is what we call my R&D notebook. So R&D, research and development. And this one was mainly because I would make a lot of journal ideas and layouts and such for the channel. So if we have a little snoop at this one, this book belongs to Jess. This is one of the few journals that I have in my lineup that isn't Archinola. This one is from Tifosi. But we have, well, first of all, I put an index in for myself because it had page numbers. So I'm like, why not? And these were the general topics that I had set up in here. So we have flexible layouts and how we could use them. That was a video on the channel. These ones are slightly stuck together because I put down some adhesive and then tried to pull it back up again. So that one is one type. This is another one about like my favorite layouts, I think, and about different structures that I use and how I enjoy using them. Then this one was about self-care layouts that actually work. So, you know, for some people, they like the gamification of a bingo. For some people, it's just keeping track of routines, doing your mid-month reviews, mind unwinds, that kind of thing. And then we got into gaming layouts. So we have, there we go, gaming layouts. I started doing it in this palette and decided I didn't like it and changed what I was using. So a whole bunch of layouts just related to making a gaming journal. And sure, I could put these in my everyday journal if I wanted to, but then I would use up a lot of pages in my everyday journal, and I would be going through an everyday journal each week, and that seems a little bit unnecessary for me, so on and so forth. But I'm not really making a lot of those videos anymore. So do I really need to have an R&D journal, or at least one like this? Possibly not. So aversions was the use of the R&D journal, because I just didn't really need it. I didn't make those types of videos, so I didn't need to get in here. So my kind of thinking with that is that there is still space in the R&D journal. It has at least like roughly half-ish left, about half a notebook left, yeah? So there's still plenty of pages for me to use. If we go to the actual next clean page, that is here on page 104, and it goes up to page 190, so plenty of space. Maybe I just start using this as a scribble book, because it's not like I could really use it for anything else. Like, sure, I could just section off the front half and use it for something, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I have already kind of started using it for scribble-esque type things, or stuff that I'm making, you know, a video for the channel and I want to do an example. This was an example of me trying to letter with my left hand. I am right-handed, so that went well. Made a thumbnail for a video, that kind of stuff. So maybe the R&D notebook just gets converted to a scribble book. which we could consider it to still be kind of like an R&D notebook, but we're going to do R and D to scribble, because then at least it still gets used. Still, it gets to fulfill its purpose of being a notebook. Thank you for your kind words about my left-handed lettering. I'm not great at brush lettering to start with, and I was very slow with doing that left-handed lettering, but at least it'll still get used. At least it will still get to fulfill its purpose of being a notebook and having things written in it. And sure, it might be a little bit messy, but I think that that's better than it just not getting used, right? So retired for now, possibly not part of the lineup next year, or it'll be more of a scribble book. That being said, I do love these for how disposable they are, and because they are, quite disposable, very easily recyclable, that type of a deal, I feel like I can be messier in here, and that's typically what I want from a scribble book, whereas even just the fact that this is a bound notebook gives me that kind of, I don't know, a bias towards making things neat in here. It makes me feel like I have to be neat, even though I know I don't have to be. Even though I have, denoted it as the scribble book, I still probably would end up being neater in there than I would be in a scribble book. I love a scribble book for being just messy and getting things out of my head quickly. It's very helpful. It's very cathartic. But the R&D notebook can scoot to the side. It's time to look at the next one. This one technically is also kind of an R&D notebook, but it's an R&D notebook with a very specific purpose. So you might have noticed that I have been doing the unboxing videos for Archer and Olive for their subscription boxes and for like the Halloween box and stuff like that. And as part of that, I like to do a really thorough job. I like to really show people the materials in there. So I wanted a space where I could put in little swatches of the stuff that's in those boxes. So for instance, this is the September box, and I swatched out the tapes and the pens and all of that. And then we have the Halloween box, and so swatched out the tapes and the pens and the stickers and all of that. That is the purpose of this journal. It doesn't get used for anything else. It is just for doing those kind of swatches. So this one is probably going to stay in the lineup. It's fulfilling the purpose well. I like that it has the ampersand on it from Archer and Olive. Like, that's their logo. So it felt very fitting to use this notebook in that way. So if we think about it in terms of wins, having a designated A&O swatch book was good. So designated A&O swatch book. I like that one has been done like for Archer and Olive, because the videos are for them, in an Archer and Olive that's very obviously Archer and Olive, that it just feels like it'll like matchy like, that's good. So that one's nice. In terms of the aversions to that one, don't love the fact that there's a stain on the front cover of it, but I don't think it matters enough to warrant writing it down. Most of the time I do try to write things down because, you reward the brain for having a thought. It means that the brain will continue to have thoughts, but I already know that that's not information I'm going to actively do anything with, so I'm just going to leave it. That one is cool. I'm going to say that possibly as a need is to still have the swatch book for Archer and Olive, so A&O swatch book, so that then I just make sure I don't declutter it or anything. You can't see the stain on the stream. Well, that's good. It is, possibly quite difficult to see. It is this kind of like pinkish little blob right there, but it doesn't show up. Haha, even better for me. So it's not too bad. It's not a sufficient enough stain that makes me really worry about anything. Thinking about swatch books, of course, I also have one that is just for me and just for my swatches, and this one is in a little B6, also Archer and Olive, because Jess has a bias. This is great. I love this so much. R&D stands for research and development, for anybody who is wondering. So swatch book, I love the size. I think that it is great. I love the way that I have ordered and organized the pages in here. I like that I made it simple to fill in and such. I love that I have my color swatches at the front. So like, these are all my red pens. These are all my oranges. These are all my yellows, so on and so forth. Those types of swatches are super, super helpful. So I'm going to continue to use those. We also then have them by pen type. So we have, all of the Tombos and all of the Crayola Super Tips and all of that kind of thing. So this has been working well. One thing that possibly isn't working as well is the fact that I had a whole bunch of Archer and Olive pens. I'm like, okay, this is going to be it. I had gotten to the light gray or like glacier gray, I think. And I'm like, okay, no more Archer and Olive pens. I'm just going to keep these ones, and that's going to be my full set of Archer and Olives, and they're all in rainbow order, and it's great. And then I started working with them for unboxings, so now I get more pens, and now I'm gonna run out of space. Devastated. It's really like a very first world problem. The first world problems are still problems, and we're still gonna write them on the list. So aversions is insufficient space. Sufficient. Spelled that wrong, but it's fine because this is the scribble book. It doesn't really matter. On calligraph swatches. It's not to say that it's not fixable. I'll just set up another page and probably have to do some threading or something like that. I don't know if I set up an index in here. Oh yeah, I did. I started numbering the pages. So maybe actually keeping the index up to date in here is not something I'm doing great with. That is a routine-based thing, or like a practice that isn't going as well. So keeping swatch index updated. But the actual use of this one, this is not so much like a daily touch or anything. I'm not getting new pens every single day. My house would be overrun with pens otherwise, but I do like to try and keep this one fairly updated. So probably some things that need to be done in here to keep it updated, but otherwise this one works quite well, especially because if we're thinking about, we talked about practice and the idea of me not keeping the index updated, but in terms of materials, I do appreciate that I have my swatch book in an Archer and Olive because the majority of the notebooks I use are Archer and Olive. So in my mind, it makes the most sense to have my swatches on paper that is equivalent to the majority of the rest of my lineup. Yeah. Yes, I have one Tifosi and then the scribble book and whatnot, but I don't really care so much about color matching for a scribble book. What I care about is color matching for my setups in my everyday journal and setups in other notebooks that are the same type of notebook as this. So this one can scoot. It's looking pretty good. We like that one. Next notebook. Okay, we're gonna do this little guy because I love a B6. Just a B6 is such a nice size. I love the compactness of it, but this one is my health journal, and the idea for this one was to have a space to write down my health-related notes, any kind of information that I was learning about different bits and pieces. So, this is about habit forming and such. This is about the BMI, which I know is not a perfect reference, but at least it is something that is easy for me to measure. We've got things about PCOS, because that's something that I have. We have meal ideas and such. And so just different pieces of information that I would find useful in working on my health-related goals. Initially, I set this one up just to be for physical health, but eventually I decided I was also going to be using it for mental health. And in the back, one of my favorite parts of this is a tracker that I set up for my exercise tracking. Yay! Look at how many little check marks there are. I think we've surpassed 140 something days in a row now. Now, the purpose of this stream is not to keep this updated, but I'm going to because I'm here. Because if you couldn't tell by the fact that I have to check a couple days off here, is I don't come into this journal very often to keep things updated, because really the only thing that I have to keep updated, mainly because the rest of it is more like reference materials and that kind of stuff, the only thing I have to keep updated in here is my exercise tracker. So I'm not great at actually getting in to check it off. I know it's kind of easy in the sense because I know I'm doing my exercise every day. I'm very much in that don't break the chain mentality right now. I want to get as many days in a row as I can. Thank you for your kind words and enthusiasm, guys. But because of that, because I know I'm doing it every single day, I know that anytime I jump in here, I just have to put check marks in all of the boxes up to the current day that I'm in. So do I need to have an entire another journal for tracking this, or could I track this in my everyday journal? Could I put this reference material somewhere else that's going to be a little bit more likely that I actually use it? And I'm thinking that at this stage of my life, yeah, I probably could put this somewhere else. That being said, this is a very satisfying tracker. I'm at least going to use it to the end of the year, and I hope to get to the end of the year with every single box checked off, except for the ones that aren't already checked off. You get the idea. But so scooting this one to the side, we'll write some notes down. I love the intention behind it. Okay, so this is the wrong pen. We're going to keep up with my Papermate flair because it's nice and bold and I can actually see what I'm writing. But intention behind health journal. I like that I essentially in making this journal, it was like a declaration to myself is how I feel about it. Like, no, you care enough about this area of your life and you are dedicated enough to this area of your life that you were going to set up an entire another journal to track that stuff. And then you kind of lean into the sunk cost fallacy. Like, I don't want to waste this notebook because I set it up and if I don't follow through on my health goals, then it would have been a waste of time. What I've now found is that I'm following through on my health goals, but I'm not using the journal. And so I feel okay with retiring the journal because it helped me kickstart the thing. It helped me get started, which means in a way it has fulfilled its purpose. Like, I am more mindful about the things I'm doing to keep myself healthy physically and mentally than I was when I first set this up. When I first set this up, I was well, I wasn't like at my lowest or anything like that, lowest in terms of, mental or physical well-being or whatnot, but I was certainly at a point where I'm like, things have to change. This is your declaration to say that things are changing. Things have now changed. I don't think I need the declaration anymore. We're going to steal the Declaration of Independence is the only thing that I've got in my head right now, but hopefully you get the idea. So I love the intention behind it. I love the fact that it helped me get started, but the actual practice or use of this notebook, not so much. Use of health journal. So maybe in the sense that, keeping track of health is still something I need. That is a necessary thing for me. So health tracking. Where can I put it that is going to be more helpful? You just rewatched that movie last weekend. Now I feel like I want to rewatch it. But the thing that maybe I could try with this is moving those information pieces, the ones that are more like reference materials, into Notion, because that's kind of where I'm starting to build out that personal knowledge management system, or like my bank of reference materials. So health info into Notion. And then I can take the exercise tracking and put that into my everyday journal. Exercise into EDJ. And so possibly in there, I can kind of denote something about, hey, this is where your streak is at the start of tracking in this journal, track through. This is where the streak is at the end of the journal, or something like that. The metaphorical Declaration of Independence may need to be transferred into a digital format. Exactly. Yeah. Independence from my bad health habits, or like whatever. But as I said, love that this got me started. Love that this was me kind of very intentionally saying I am prioritizing this for myself, but that means it has filled its purpose. Is the notebook finished? No, not really. Like, there are plenty of pages in the middle that have gone unused or whatnot, but it has done for me what I needed it to do for me, and thus it is okay for it to be let go. All right. Like, similar idea with the yearly collections journal, right? The yearly collections journal still has space in it, but it has done for me what I needed it to do for me. During that season of my life, when I needed to have those things in a separate space because of the ways I was using my journal, and I was, still using annual planning and such, it had a purpose. That purpose has now been fulfilled because my planning style has changed. My preferences have changed. Similar idea with this. You have filled your purpose. Thank you. We appreciate you. Next. Alrighty, the next one we have is my reading journal. Look at this chongus. And you can see this one also hasn't been finished off, and that's because I fell off with using it. But I loved this. I loved this so much. Okay, so one thing we're going to note. I love the intricate cover. I know beautiful covers is something that I already noted. We're going to put like 2 check marks next to that because it's really important to me. I love a notebook that looks good, makes me feel good, makes me more likely to get in and use it. I enjoyed the process of both setting this one up and getting quite decorative, and having these kind of more intricately decorated start of journal pages. I mean, a lot of it was done via the tape or whatnot, but I think that having these kind of little cutouts and the arches and corners and such, I love it. I loved it so, so much. But I did find that when it came to doing the monthly pages in here, that is something that I fell off with. I kind of got to a point where I'm like, I don't care when I consumed what media. I don't need to fill in all of these pages. Like, I loved the stats because stats just make me happy, but keeping up with everything else did get a little bit tiring. Looking back through it, though, I love the way it looks, but it was always a bummer when I had a perfect pie graph in 2 halves because the pie graph looked less cool. How about doing a bookmark for the chain exercise? Definitely a possibility. I know a lot of people do a a yearly collection as a bookmark. They might make a year at a glance bookmark, and then they can use that to not only mark their page in their journal, but then they can use it as the tracker that it is as well, which is quite cool. So I do love my reading journal for having kind of like the memory keeping aspect of consuming the different pieces of media. I didn't love the monthly pages though. So what I ended up doing was adjusting, because this isn't my only reading journal that I've made this year. I adjusted to make this one. And this is the notebook in my lineup that was kind of repurposed, which you can possibly see from the front, given that there's this gap. I know it's a little blurry, but there is an interesting gap there because this one was my long-term collections journal. So my long-term collections journal, which was in my lineup at the start of the year, was an aversion. So LTC use, just in case I muse with the idea of bringing back the long-term collections journal, no, we're not doing that. I did not need it because the information that I had in there, I was just looking to Notion for it. And that's essentially where I ended up moving that stuff, or have been slowly moving that stuff. All of those reference materials that I had for those long-term things that I wanted to refer to, I would just move those into a digital space because it's easier to update. It's more likely that I will have it when I need it because I'm not like toting my long-term collections journal around with me. So LTC into Notion, already started trying it, but we'll write it down because it is technically part of my decision-making process. So, given that I wasn't using the long-term collections journal, but I did want to set up a new reading journal, I repurposed this notebook to be a reading journal. So I ripped out the first pages of it, stuck some scrapbooking paper over the top of it to cover up all of the pages that I removed, gave myself a new index, set up myself some new trackers and such. And so this one has been a bit of fun. I haven't been great at keeping up with this one either, just because ignoring this page, just because I haven't gone and printed off my little cover pictures yet. So I've kind of like got a space holder here, but I have been enjoying it. I have enjoyed the kind of pared down version of the start of this one. And a reading journal is just something I genuinely enjoy. So we're going to put down one of the wins is the enjoyment of a reading journal. So in keeping that in mind, in keeping the fact that the enjoyment factor for a reading journal is really what I am looking for, what can I do? What kind of things could I try? What kind of things could I either take away or really par down on or lean into that will add to my enjoyment of that journal? Because it is purely for enjoyment, because it is something that I'm just doing because I think it's a bit of fun. How can I make sure that it doesn't feel like work? It just feels like fun. So enjoyment, I probably should have said of the reading journal, enjoyment, reading journal. Close enough. She knows what she means. And actually it says journal now, because again, this is the scribble book and the actual proper English doesn't matter here as long as you know what you meant. So enjoyment, love that. Aversions were probably the time to use. And by that I mean I'd never really set aside the time to use it. So reading journal, what I want to kind of get to is a point where my dedicated reading journal time, or the time that I'm using for the reading journal, is the weekly hangouts with my friends. Every week on a Wednesday, we have the midweek mafia hangout, which is essentially just Rachel, Monica, and I. We just get together, have some banter, maybe do some journaling or some creativity projects or whatnot. So for instance, yesterday for creativity, Rachel was working on her Kindle case or her iPad case and making a kind of pretty insert for that. Monica was doing a coloring book and I was working in my journal. So we kind of, bring our own project and work on it and just hang out or whatnot. I would like to make that my intentional time for doing my reading journal. And I think that is an adjustment or a change that isn't so outside of my wheelhouse that it wouldn't work. Yeah. If I'm going to do that, if that is what I want to do, then something that I need to do is make sure that I have an updated list of the things I need to print for it so I can take those materials with me. Because I'm not going to take my printer to Monica's house and be like, oh yeah, let me just hook this up so I can print off my reading journal covers. No, that's not what's going to happen. So something that I need is maybe a running doc of covers to print for reading journal. I'm just going to say read Joe because it's easier. So that is something that maybe I need to start, like, building into my habits or my routines or such. Yeah, there we go. We'll just call it Read Your Wednesday. Exactly. I mean, I don't think that we all actively work on our reading journals, but it is more likely that I'd like to work on that. I do also work on my regular journal at the same time, but still. So, in thinking about that, one of the aversions that I have with this one is that the cover isn't quite as pretty. Like, it is a pretty cover, don't get me wrong. Like, I do love the red and gold together. I think it's a really nice combination and such. But I do love that kind of extraness that comes with doing a reading journal like this, a reading journal that is quite intricate and such. It gives me the good feelings. I love this one so, so much. So I'm thinking that if I'm setting up a reading journal for next year, what kind of cover do I want to lean into, given that that is something I super, super love? All right. So another journal that I have, or another one in my lineup that I haven't really spoken about very much recently or ever, is the one that I'm using for the Know Your Worth workbook. That is this one. It is a disc-bound system. It has inserts and such. The actual inserts kind of start here. It's a 31-day challenge. Because this is a 31-day challenge and I'm really only going to be using it for Q4, like, I'm not going to be taking this one into next year, and I already know that, I don't foresee it being necessary to write much down about this. So we're going to scoot that one to the side. But I guess, if you're doing this process, given the fact that it can take a while, especially if you're not really familiar with it, don't worry, we're not finished. We're still going to talk about stuff. But if you're doing this process and you're finding it's taking a while and you're like, oh gosh, is this actually going to be worth it? Remember that this type of process it's effectively a type of reflection. This type of reflection is only as useful as what you do with the information once you've collected it. So if we've sat here for an hour and we've written this stuff down, if I got to the end of the hour and went, cool, and just like kicked it to the side and then went about my day, yeah, I wasted an hour. I didn't waste an hour. I got to spend it with you. It was a good time for me. What is the most important part, though, is to consider the information you've collected and use it to inform your process. Like, what are you actually going to do with this info? Good point. We should have a tink break. Tink, we love a drink. Again, I'm still chugging my water. Hopefully you guys have something more interesting to drink. So I'm thinking about my list. I'm thinking about the fact that I have this other planner that I am only going to be using for Q4. Sure, I could go through it and be like, okay, what do I like about it? What do I not like about it? Yada yada. I already know that that one has like a finite lifetime. That lifetime is going to lapse at the end of this quarter, and I'm not going to be adding anything into my lineup that is going to replace it. So there's not a lot of point in me going through and having a look at that. Tepid water, delicious. It sounds more exciting than mine, but it definitely isn't. Oh, a pink lemonade. That's fun. I love that. I want a pink lemonade. This is not fair. Okay, I can go and make myself one, but anyway. Once we get to the end of looking through all of our notebooks, though, as you can kind of see, the majority of sections that are actually filled, or the ones that are most filled, are the wins and aversions, because we're essentially looking back. All right, this top section is all about looking back. What worked? What didn't? What was good? What kind of sucked? What do I want more of? What do I want less of? That's what this kind of section is for. Whereas down the bottom here is more like future casting or thinking forward, thinking, what does future Jess need? I mean, you don't necessarily need to ask it about me. You could just sit there and be like, what does Jess need? But probably you should probably ask it for yourself, What do you foresee being necessary for you next year? Do you know that, life is going to change in some way? Like, oh, I'm going to be actively looking for a new job. Do I need to have a work journal? Am I going to be working on a whole bunch of home projects next year? Do I need to have a dedicated space for that I can share with anybody that I'm working with on those things? Is there kind of too much complexity in my system and I really want to simplify and such? What do you think you need? And yes, it can be difficult to future cast when we're thinking we're sitting here in October or whatever. What is January through to December of next year me gonna need? Thankfully, I'm probably looking towards more of a quarterly system, so I'm just thinking of Q1 next year more than anything else. But some of the needs that you could foresee for yourself, I think that the easiest way to think about needs is just to consider your different life areas and use that to kind of frame your thinking. So everybody's life areas are going to be a little different. They aren't necessarily going to be the same as mine, but we'll go through my life areas because this is my list, so, makes sense. First life area, physical health. Like, what kind of things do I need in my lineup, or could I put in my lineup, or might I need to account for in my lineup that is related to physical health? As noted, I already want to do health tracking. I don't necessarily want to chuck in an entire new planner just for health journaling or anything like that, but maybe that is something that would be valuable for you. Second life area, mental health. I like to split my healths because I feel like they just like work better in my brain if I split them. So is there anything in particular that I need for my mental health? One of those things is the scribble book. We're going to be keeping the scribble book. It is a need. Scribble book. Scribble book. Because this is where I get messy with things. This is where I don't need to be as persnickety and precious about things because I don't really care how it looks. It's just to get the information out. That is something that is helpful for my mental well-being because it's where I can be very messy in my thinking and then make sense of it later. Next category could be something like personal development. So is there any kind of, journals or structures or planners or whatnot that you want to use to help you support your own learning or your own development or anything like that? For me, I don't think I need any specific journals for that. There are definitely structures within the journals that I would want, but that's not really my focus for right now. So I'm not going to write anything down. Next category would be home or household or environment. Is there anything in particular you want to add into this that you need to consider as related to home and household? One of your considerations could definitely be around the supplies. Like if you're in a space that is a little bit, tight, like finite, you don't have a huge like shelf that you can put an entire fleet of journals on, maybe you need to consider that like my maximum I can have in my space is like 3 or 2 or whatnot. So that could be something that you write down. For instance, one of the considerations I have with my home environment right now is that I've really loved rearranging my desk and having less notebooks on my desk. So I probably only want to have like max 4 notebooks on desk or something in that realm. I have enjoyed having a kind of like smaller set that I'm actively able to grab. Like, sitting at my desk, I can just very easily grab that. Everything else needs to be away in the closet or anything like that. Very good question. Is this a specific strategy, something we can read more of in a specific book? I don't think so. This is a system that, at least like from my understanding, I developed it for myself. So like the want analysis and then the questions that I use underneath that is more so something that I've developed over time as I have journaled more and honed my practice or whatnot. We do have a separate video on the channel that talks about the want analysis. It's a little bit less long than this video because this is obviously real time, but maybe that could help you out. I don't think there's any books about it. Maybe I should write a book. I'm going to put that on my list for next year. Maybe one of your goals is to write a book. That's definitely something to think about in that personal development category from before. What goals are you working on? Is there anything in particular that you need to have in your system as related to those goals? For me, it would be like a goal planner. But yeah, so for home environment, for me, a maximum of 4 notebooks on my desk, that is something that is valuable. The next thing to think about, what is another category? Fun and leisure, that's a big one. All right, make sure that you have some balance. For me, my fun is the reading journal. It's something I really love. That is the major kind of like fun factor in my lineup that I really enjoy. So that is going to be something that I need. I need to have my reading journal for fun. Rejo for fun. We'll put that one down. Alrighty, secondary question. Alrighty, what can I do if my need is to get a bigger journal, but I cannot afford it? That one is a tricky one. I guess, like, one question I would have is like, where are you looking for your notebooks and how much bigger is the bigger that you need, I guess. I know, like, for instance, Tifosi is a company that a lot of people gravitate towards because of like, the free shipping aspect and being a slightly more budget friendly version. Is it bigger in terms of like page size or is it bigger in terms of page number? That would also be something to consider. I mean, if you're thinking about needs for each of these, like needs for your journals, that is also something to consider. Do you need to have a notebook that is going to last you a full year? Do you need to have like 300 pages in it? That's a little bit of an aside. But yeah, I like that Eve has a good idea here, is like splitting it into smaller, cheaper notebooks is a possibility for sure. Yeah. So Next life area after fun and leisure is, for me, work. So a lot of people do prefer to have their work journal be separate from their regular life journal. Maybe that's something that you want to have in your system, especially if you're kind of concerned about privacy or like, getting official information requests or something and, having your journal audited or whatnot with all of your regular life stuff in there. If that's a concern for you, maybe you want to have a separate work journal in your lineup. That could be something to add in. I don't really need that, so I'm not going to add that in. Then after work, we have what I call my social categories, which I have like a few of. So we have partner, social in terms of like friends, and then social in terms of family, because I consider all of those separate. Maybe as part of your lineup, you want to have a journal that is like shared with somebody else for like shared plans. Maybe that's a possibility if it's something that both of you are going to use. Or possibly for those shared plans, you want to have something in a digital space, like a digital calendar. Or maybe you want to, instead of a notebook in your lineup or whatnot, have a wall calendar or something like that. Not everything that we're organizing in our lives has to go in a notebook or has to go in a planner. It doesn't mean that you can't go with a system like that, but oftentimes you're going to find that it's better suited to somewhere else, right? And that's kind of what this process is helping us uncover, I guess. So other needs, we can also think about the materials, like we said. Is there like, a need in terms of I want to use a fountain pen, so I need fountain pen friendly paper? Is there a need in terms of I have like a fleet of, I don't know, Erin Condren sticker packs, so I want to be able to use those up and I need a planner that has the correct sizing for that or whatnot? Next section, though, is to try. Is there anything you've been musing with or any kind of things that have been sparking curiosity or like a little bit of enthusiasm that you want to lean into more? So maybe it is a journaling technique. Maybe you've been really excited about the prospect of waterfall tabs, but you've been using a traveler's notebook and that doesn't really allow for having waterfall tabs, or they would have to be quite skinny. Maybe you then want to go to a different size notebook that has a bit more width so you can use those waterfall tabs. Maybe you've been seeing a whole bunch of people using, I always throw Hobonichi under the bus, but maybe you've been seeing a lot of Hobonichis and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to use a Hobonichi. Like, I think my time has come. I'm curious enough about it and I've been musing with it for long enough that I want to lean into that. Or possibly you want to try out maybe a new routine or something like that. We can also jot that down in this space. So things that I want to try. I've already noted the fact that I might go to an A5 or a square for the everyday journal. I kind of want to lean into a bit more of digital planning, especially for the especially for those kind of things that are long-term reference material. I just went and had a look at this one. Yeah, traveler's notebook, you could do waterfall tabs on the horizontal rather than vertical. Definitely. Like, there are ways to work with that and such that could also work for other people, which could be a lot of fun. So if I'm thinking about other things that I might want to try, we already noted the idea of putting the goal planner in a square. More than anything, I want to try a pared down lineup. So if we kind of have a little peruse, a snoop through just of the ones that I had from before, we're not going to put the scribble book too far away because the scribble book is definitely part of the lineup. So bringing our fleet back, and we're going to see if we can zoom out without this having a conniption at me like it did before. Here we go. Good zooming, good zooming. So now, that being said, with this whole idea of a pared down kind of lineup, I do need to account for the fact that I'll be going from 3 everyday journals to 4. So that's something to keep in mind. But we kind of scoot these ones over and have a little snoop and then think about what I want to do with each of them. If I am paring down, making smaller, all right, the yearly collections journal, I think I'm going to let go of it. I don't think I need it anymore. I don't really love annual planning. I haven't been checking in with it, so maybe that's not something I need. All right, so this one we can say goodbye. Thank you for your service. That one is gone. If we're thinking about my health journal, right? This one has fulfilled its purpose. Its purpose was to really kind of get me hyped and incentivize me to start my health journey. And now as I'm on it, I find that I don't need to check in with this one. I don't need this to be in a notebook anymore. So that's one that we can say, thank you. You fulfilled your purpose. It's time to go, right? Another one that we can possibly let go of. Another one The R&D notebook, right? So R&D, research and development. I'm not really doing a lot of those like mega ideas lists of journal layouts anymore. So because of that, I guess it's okay to retire this one. Maybe I'll turn it into a scribble book, but honestly, I kind of just love the scribble book for being a scribble book. I like that it feels a lot more disposable and it allows me to be a little bit more freeform. So I think the R&D notebook, you have filled your purpose. Thank you so much for being here, but it's time to go. All right. So that's one less for the lineup. The 5-year journal, definitely staying. I have been very much enjoying it. You're all good. We'll put you over here. You're fine. The swatch book, you have been fulfilling your purpose. We love you for that. Thank you so much. I promise that I'll get in and actually update the index. You can stay. The Archer and Olive swatch book. This one has a very set purpose, and it is just for swatching Archer and Olive products for their videos. So this one I almost wouldn't even consider to be part of my lineup because it's not something that I use even frequently enough to consider. Right? So this one is okay for now. Would I consider it part of the lineup? Maybe, maybe not. This life has turned into a retirement party. I know, right? So other ones that are going to be retiring, just because of the nature of the notebook, the everyday journals are retiring because at the end of the year, this one will be done. These two are already finished, but I am going to need more everyday journals. So for the sake of having a good count, we're going to put these 3 over here because I am going to need at least 3, if not 4 everyday journals next year. They won't be these specific notebooks, but I will need them. These guys, though, we have 2 reading journals. I'm not going to need 2 reading journals next year because the way that I will do my reading journal will be able to fit sufficiently within one of these because I've stripped out a lot of those kind of monthly trackers and such. It'll free up a lot of space for me. So I'll only need one. It's going to be gorgeously decorated because I just love the look of a super decorated cover, which means that this one is going to be the stand-in because it won't actually be this notebook. We'll put that over there. This one can get retired. Thank you for your service. We appreciate you. You can go. And then the goals journal. I know you have space. I know it has space. But I really love the idea of starting a new one. And if we're leaning into joy, okay, we're doing journaling here. We're trying to make it a joyful process that we are enthusiastic about because if we're enthusiastic and if it's fun, we're more likely to keep up with it. This one might get retired. And I'll bring in another one. We'll make it a square. Yeah? Yeah, because that's the entire point of doing this process. So that means that my lineup for next year, not these actual notebooks, because half of these are already full, but actual notebooks. 5-year journal, that'll stay. Swatch book will stay. Archer and Olive swatch book will stay. I will have everyday journals. They will not be these ones. I will have a reading journal. It will not be this one. And I will have a goals journal. It will not be this one. In terms of having them stay on my desk, like I kind of mentioned, one of the needs was just having a maximum of 4 notebooks on my desk. We're actually using this information. We're not just writing it down for the sake of writing it down. The ones that will constantly stay on my desk are going to be whatever everyday journal I'm working on at the time, whatever goal planner I have at the time, and my reading journal. The other ones will live elsewhere. Okay, so it'll just be these 3 and the scribble book. There we go, that's 4. These 3 and the scribble book. These ones will either live in the cupboard because they're being, completely filled up. Like the everyday journals, they will be in the cupboard because they'll be completely filled up. It'll be my 5-year journal, which lives beside my bed so that I actually fill it in at the end of the day. Yeah, not another Blue Joe lineup, I know, right? The swatch books, though, they can live in the cupboard because I don't need to have them as easily accessible. Like, they don't need to be within my line of sight. I don't need them to be, that handy, right? Like, I don't use them frequently enough to warrant them having a space on my desk. But as said, though, putting these aside and bringing back the scroll book because the most important part of doing this kind of process, we'll zoom us in so that we can have a little snoop, is taking the information and actually applying it. So kind of like what we just did, going through and thinking about, okay, I want an everyday journal, but what size do I want? I'm going to have a goal planner, but I think it's going to be in a square. The R&D book is going to be a scribble book. We're going to actually do these things. We're not just looking at the try list, though. We're also looking at the other ones. We want to go through every single thing we've written on here and think about how we can actually apply that information. So Beautiful covers. I'm going to pick a gorgeous covered notebook for my reading journal. Which one should I use? Great question. Not sure. I'll decide later. Okay. But as I'm going through, these are the things I'm thinking about. I'm actually going to apply this information. I want to do quarterly planning in my everyday journal. So I need to make sure that I pick a notebook that is going to be suitable for everyday journaling, and it's going to be quarterly. All right. It's going to be okay to use it in that way, which means I'm not going to pick a Tifosi that has 256 pages, because there's no way in heck that I'm going to be able to use 256 pages in a 3-month period. My type of journaling does not allow for that. So that is going to be something I apply to my decision making. For my goals planner, like we said, the horizontal space was limited. I want to have a square notebook, so I'm going to go through my square notebook stash and be like, okay, which one of these is going to be the best one to pick? I'm kind of tempted to start looking at them. I'm not actually going to look at it now, but the collection of the information is great for informing us, but let it inform your practice. Let it actually help you make your decisions. Go through the information, use it to make your choices. All right? Hopefully this was helpful. I definitely enjoyed it once we finally got it working. If you were here for the first stream, then good job. And if you came back for the second, double plus, good job. If you're here on the replay, I hope that this also was helpful for you. I'm going to go and pick out some notebooks for myself though. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.